And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. And we start with the state of the sea ice, and the ice continues to melt off here across the central northern Bering with a lot of open water there. And in fact, we have another one area of low pressure that's sitting out here in the central Bering, and another one that's going to be crossing the Alaska Peninsula as we go through Wednesday afternoon and into Wednesday night. And it will provide some stronger winds along the southern region of this area of melting ice. But the rate of melting has really picked up here, and it will continue to be more on the rapid side as we head up through mid-month. As we look at the synoptic weather map late tonight into early on Wednesday morning, here comes the next low out of the North Pacific. This low will be crossing the Alaska Peninsula Wednesday afternoon and evening, and this is another windy low with more rain at sea level and at low elevations. The low out here in the central Bering, the one that came up over the weekend, is going to pull back toward the south and west across the western half of the Aleutians as we go through the latter portion of the midweek. Still have a trough of low pressure along the Alaska Range in the northwest Canada, and at least those of you in the Panhandle along the northeastern Gulf Coast, Yakutat, will get a little drier weather this Tuesday night and during the daytime on Wednesday before this front arrives and spreads more rain and wind along the Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle later Wednesday night and certainly by Thursday morning. So Wednesday afternoon we have a low approaching the middle Alaska Peninsula around Sand Point. That low will cross into the southeast Bering and kind of split, one piece coming up here into the western Gulf, the main piece staying out here in the lower southeast portion of the Bering Sea. And that old low is just kind of heading southwestward as we go through the midweek period. On Thursday afternoon, we have the low that just crossed the Alaska Peninsula, just kind of sitting there off of Kuskokwim-Bristol Bay. And east of the Pribilovs, we have a weak secondary low coming across Kodiak Island. The main thing I should have mentioned here on Wednesday into Wednesday night, we're going to have some storm force winds coming in there at Cook Entrance, Kamishak Bay, and also wind-driven rain there along Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, spreading up along the eastern Kenai. So by the time we get to Thursday, more rains will be covering much of the Panhandle along with some breezy conditions. And getting into Friday, that system will continue to weaken further, but could still see some lingering showers along areas of the Gulf Coast and Panhandle. So Wednesday, look for a mixed bag of winds for the inner channel. South 10 knots, 2-foot waves there around Stevens Passage. Southeast winds 10 knots, 2-foot waves in the vicinity there of Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. But then down here toward Dixon Entrance, look for north-northwest winds, or I should say northwest to west winds at 10 knots and waves 3 feet. As we get to the outer coast, winds southerly there, Sitka off to the south at 15 knots, more southeasterly winds, 15 to 20 knots there outside of Yakutat Bay. And then the winds will increase later Wednesday night and certainly on Thursday. North winds, Lynn Canal at 15 knots, 2-foot waves, southeast winds to 20 knots, 4-foot waves with Stevens Passage. And then Dixon Entrance, we're looking at southeasterly winds of 30 to as high as 35 knots with waves 7 feet. They are near Metlakatla, but you get out to the outer coast, waves could be up to 12 feet. Those southeast winds turning more easterly, 35-knot winds out of the Icy Strait area and coming into the Gulf, with waves of 9 feet and winds upwards of easterly there at 30 knots around Cape Suckling. Now for the western Gulf and Cook Inlet, the strongest winds are going to be just northeast of Kodiak Island into the entrance of Cook Inlet. 50-knot storm force winds Wednesday into Wednesday night, waves building upwards of 14, 15 feet. As we go up along the eastern Kenai, 40-knot easterly gales. We're expecting easterly winds of 30 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, east winds 25 knots within Prince William Sound, and upper Cook Inlet winds northeasterly at 20 knots, but increasing as we drop further south. Once you get south of Anchor Point, though, you could be encountering some storm force winds toward Kamishak Bay. On Thursday, winds will come down a bit. We're still looking at 30-knot easterly winds between Kayak Island and Hinchinbrook Entrance. Waves 11, 12 feet. Northeast winds 15 knots within Prince William Sound, 3-foot waves. Northeast to north winds 20 to 25 knots, upper middle Cook Inlet, but still through lower Cook Inlet there, especially Kennedy Entrance and northeast of Kodiak Island. Easterly gales of 35 to 40 knots with waves of 9 to 13 feet. So as that low crosses the Alaska Peninsula around Sandpoint, Perryville, we're looking at easterly gales of 40 knots around Kodiak Island on Wednesday, as well as there off of Chicknick. And as we drop down along the Bering side, northeast gales, either in gust or sustained 35 to 40 knots. Winds north-northwest either side of Cold Bay False Pass at 25 knots. On Thursday, we still see that low circulation. This is the secondary low near Kodiak Island that's riding along that frontal boundary that extends out into the Gulf and just off the Panhandle. We're looking at south and then easterly winds high as 30 knots within Shelikof Strait and 7-foot waves. And then as we trail out down along the Alaska Peninsula, winds will become more southwest to west at 25 knots. The eastern Aleutians Wednesday will have east-southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, but flipping around to the west, Nikolsky through Atka to Adak, and then west of Adak winds more northwesterly at 20 to 25 knots. On Thursday, generally southwest winds over the eastern and central Aleutians at 15 to 20 knots. Further west, we have north-northwest winds around Kiska back through Shimia. And then out of Bristol Bay on Wednesday, northeasterly gales of 35 knots, 20-knot northeast winds out of Kuskokwim Bay, southeast winds there along the Pribilovs at 25 knots with waves to 9 feet. Lower Yukon coast and Norton Sound, we expect northeast winds of 15 to 20 knots. And then on Thursday, those northeasterly winds 15 to 20 knots continue out of Norton Sound along the lower Yukon coast. Northeast winds 15 knots out of Bristol Bay. East winds 25 knots there within Bristol Bay, but Kuskokwim Bay rather northeast winds at 15 knots, and then more of a westerly wind across the Pribilovs at 15 knots on Thursday. The area south of the Bering Strait along the west side of the Seward Peninsula on over toward the north side of St. Lawrence Island on Wednesday, winds will generally be northeasterly around 20 knots. East winds of 20 knots out of Kotzebue Sound. As we go up along the Chukchi Sea coast, winds fall off 10 to 15 knots around Point Hope, Cape Lisburne. But as we get up around Wainwright, all the way through Kaktovik, look for easterly winds at 20 knots on Wednesday. And on Thursday, winds could still be easterly as high as 20-25 knots. Dead Horse on over to Kaktovik. Still easterly 10 to 15 knots at Utqiagvik to Wainwright, and then more northeasterly winds dropping down through the lower Chukchi Sea 15 to 20 knots. And by the time we get around to the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales to Nome, as well as Savunga to Gamble on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, on Thursday we expect northerly winds at 20 to 25 knots.